Hi, Jeff Spira here again. And today I want to talk to you about some interesting voyages that may have happened quite some time ago. I'm going to roll the clock back here to about 3500 BC and in Japan. Let me just start with a little history of some of the peoples of Japan. Until about 10,500 BC, Japan was connected to the coast of Asia. It was a peninsula sort of that stuck out, kind of like Korea is now. Now the area in between Japan and Asia, which is what we call the Sea of Japan, that filled in with water about 10,000 by 500 BC. The seas rose like 400 feet due to the sudden end of the ice age. Global warming was happening back then over thousands and thousands of years that brought the end of the ice age to an end. But scientists nowadays are pretty certain that there was an explosion of some sort, an extraterrestrial event. Could have been an impact of some kind that ended the ice age extremely quickly and drove plenty of the glaciers into the ocean, and the ocean rose very, very quickly. When the dinosaurs ended about 60 million years ago, an asteroid crashed into the Earth, and this is found at the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula down in Mexico. But they've not found any such crater that came to the end of the ice age. It just it suddenly changed. And in that reason, they think this may not have been an asteroid. Typically, an asteroid is made of metal. A lot of times, meteorites are found that they're made out of iron and nickel. But it may have been a comet. Now, a comet is more a dirty ice ball. And there was an event in Tunguska in Siberia in 1906 where there was a 12 megaton explosion. It happened above the Earth, 5,000 feet up, something like that, which was, that's a pretty substantial event. The Alaska or the Arizona meteor crater, for instance, is a mile across, and they think that was a 10 megaton explosion, but that was an actual asteroid. It was about the size of a city bus that crashed there and left that huge crater. But in Tunguska in Russia, it flattened trees for miles and miles around, and they thought it was about a 12 megaton explosion. So they tend to think that was a comet that exploded in the air. Now the end of the last ice age, they have the chemical markers. They have iridium that they found all over the Earth and that kind of thing. But there was they haven't found a crater where anything would have hit. So that's why they believe that the end of the ice age happened because a comet blew up. Anyway, living in Japan at the time of this huge explosion were the Jomon people. They're not the same race of the people that currently live in Japan. The people that live there now have very Chinese DNA, so they're ethnically the same race as the Chinese. Anyway, they came maybe 500 BC or 5 to 700 BC. Is when the people that now call themselves Japanese were actually arrived from China. So, but there were people living in Japan that there are now called the Ainu that may have been the descendants of the Jomon at the time. The Jomon history, they've done a lot of archaeology in Japan, and they've discovered Jomons going back as much as 16,000 BC. So I mean, they've been there a long time. anyway, the sea levels at 10,500 BC, rose 400 feet. They've come across this pyramid down in the Ryukyu Islands that is pretty conclusively man-made, and it's under 400 feet of water. And so you can imagine what the sea level rising that fast would have done to the people living there. Now, people normally live, along the coastlines where they have access to food and, water and, all kinds of things. Um, and the sea rising quickly certainly killed a lot of people. And all over the world. I mean, they've got evidence of cities in India and different places in the bottom of the North Sea and that sort of thing. So, and certainly in Japan. So the Jomons that were up in the mountains and all that kind of became the main family of Jomons. So anyway, so a lot of things changed at that time. So. Now, about 3,500 BC, there was a big eruption in Japan. It's the Kyushu supervolcano erupted. That volcano is still there today. It's called Mount Aso. Is one of the places where it happens. They actually call that area the Seven Hells. It's the southern island of Japan, of the big four islands in Japan. They still have evacuations now where the ash will come exploding out of it, and pyroclastic flows will come out of it on occasion. There's enough time for people to get away from it. It's not one of those huge explosive volcanoes like Krakatoa or something that just blows up in one day. But during the huge volcanic eruption of 3,500 BC, people had time to get away, so they could get in their boats and that sort of thing and move away from the area where this was going on and get out of the flow of it. So now the only way out of that volcanic area would have been to go north. So there's some speculation that some of these people leaving that as they went north, of course, it goes north, and so I mean it's getting colder and all that, and Kyushu, the island, is fairly nice weather-wise, so they think it's possibility that some of these people came all the way around. Through Russia and Alaska, and on boats, on vessels, and then back down the coast through British Columbia, and eventually ending up in Mexico and Central America. That's the speculation anyway. So they found some steel blades in Alaska that were dated to about this time. They've been Japanese artifacts found in Vancouver, that sort of thing. So back in 1996, there were two students named Will Thomas and David Deasy, and they were watching the hydroplane races along the Columbia River that separates Oregon and Washington, in a place called Kennewick, Washington, and they discovered a skull in the river. And they thought it was modern, and they thought, oh my God, we found a dead body somewhere here. So they notified the police. The police came and looked at it, and the coroner said, this is not a modern, this is not a victim of crime or whatever. It's old. So he turned it over to an archeologist named James Chatters, who made 10 visits to the site where they found it, and they collected more than 350 bones and fragments, which was almost the entire skeleton. The cranium was fully intact with all the teeth at the time of death, and they examined it, and they said, this is not a Native American skull or body or set of skeletons. So and it was not the Paleo American group. They concluded the body was Caucasian, not Native American. So they called in an anthropologist named Joseph Powell from the University of New Mexico. And he examined all the remains, and he used craniometric data obtained with an anthropologist named William White Howells of Harvard University and an anthropologist named Tsukino Hanihara of Saga University in Japan, because they had a lot of data about this, the craniums of Japanese and Asian and North American, a lot of data they can mix this information with and pull out likely candidates. And they came to the conclusion that Kennewick man wasn't European, but most resembled the Ainu, which are the Japanese natives, and they're actually the descendants of the Jomon. There's still Ainu that live in Japan today, so they live mostly on the northern island called Hokkaido. So there's been a storm of controversy about this skeleton since. Native Americans claim it's one of theirs, and DNA testing has put more into it, that there's some possibility it could be Paleo American, Native American. So, but it also is conclusively could be part of the Jomon, and the Ainu are really, and the Jomon were really Polynesian descendants. They weren't really Asian descendants, as you tend to think of East Asians. So anyway, there's been a lot of controversy, and there's been lawsuits. They think getting the skull and that sort of thing. So I did some research on this when I was in Japan in I'm going to say 2004 or 2005, I think. I visited because I was already looking into some of this information, and I visited the Maritime Museum in Tokyo, and looked at some Jomon boats and different kinds of boats, because there's actually several periods of Japanese history that I've done in some of my other videos as well. So. And the Jomon boats were pretty crude. They were dugouts, but they were capable of making ocean voyages in it, and they did go fishing offshore, and they hunted marine mammals back then as well. Anyway, a lot of people got to thinking, how did the Kennewick men really get there? So, and there's another person called John Turk, who was a Canadian. He thought he'd see if he could make the journey that the Jomon supposedly made, or the Kennewick men made anyway, from Japan to the Americas. So he set out in a kayak from Japan. He left the northern island of Hokkaido in 1999 in May. And he headed for America. So the first summer, he ended up in September. He got all the way to the town of Petropavlik on the Kamchatka Peninsula, and he stopped for the winter there. And then in May of 2000, he went back and resumed his journey from Petropavlik and sailed all the way up the coast of Alaska. I'm sorry, the coast of Russia, and crossed the strait into Alaska. And he landed actually in Alaska, which was, that's a long journey, and it was 6 months. Did it all alone in a one-man boat. So that was quite an adventure. So. He published his findings in 2005 in a book called In the Wake of the Jomon. It was published by McGraw-Hill. I got a copy of the book, and I got a hold of him by email, and we had a lot of interesting conversations back and forth about Jomon and the Ainu and those kinds of things. And he anyway, he signed my book, my copy of the book, and we had some great conversations, and interesting guy. So the question is, other than, John's Turk's voyage from Japan to America in a single seater boat, is there any other evidence? Well, yeah, there is. About 4,500 years ago, the tradition of ceramic making suddenly appeared in the fishing village of Valdivia. Let me put that again. Valdivia, Ecuador. Okay. There was no ceramics making at the time in that area. That was the first time any ceramics were made in the Americas. So it was the earliest pottery was discovered that had some very peculiar sizes and shapes and decorations on them. They had very advanced decoration techniques. The Valdivia pottery building was introduced fully developed. And actually the Jomons had been developing that for that method of sizes and shapes and decorations for over 10,000 years. And you can trace the lineage of how old the pottery is by that. But it arrived almost instantly in Peru, where this, or I'm sorry, Ecuador. Where did I go? Yeah, this Valdivia, Ecuador. So that's where it came just instantly. So in 1960s, there was a team of researchers that went to Valdivia, and they noticed significant similarities between the archaeological remains and those of the Jomon culture. So at that same time in Kyushu, Japan, so which is where that volcano exploded. So they compared the decoration, vessel shape, painting techniques, and then the techniques of incising the pottery. And then, the Valdivia pottery seemed to have emerged almost instantaneously. In 1962, three prominent archaeologists, there was an Ecuadorian named Emilio Estrada and two Americans named Clifford Evans and Betty Meggers, both Smithsonian Institute archaeologists, they suggested that Japanese people must have brought the Jomon pottery making techniques to Ecuador. There's another specialist of pre-Columbian art named von Wuthenhau, at the University of the Americas in Mexico City, who found terracotta models of ancient sailing ships manned by oarsmen with all striking Japanese features. They discovered it at a burial site in Guerrero, Mexico, which is along the Pacific coast. And there's some evidence that this occurred at the exact same time. So, in addition to the pottery and skeletons, there's some other DNA evidence linking Jomons to the Native Americans. Technical papers that are starting to come out now shows DNA genetic string similarities. So that only appear in those two groups of people. So could this have been around in the ancient past before the Ice Age ended, while Americas and Asia were connected by a land bridge? Maybe. No one really knows at this time. There's a gene common in the Jomon people. It's called a retrovirus of ATL, which is the human T lymphoatic virus, HTVL1. This virus was discovered to be the cause of adult T cell leukemia. Research was advanced by Takuo Hyumuna at Kyoto University, and they have a virus research institute there. So The very same vector virus was introduced to North America about this time, 3000, 3500 BC, in Central America. So the natural path of infection of this virus is limited to vertical infection between women and children. Typically happens through breastfeeding. So for this virus to be common in Jomon period and then all of a sudden appear in Central America was pretty shocking too. So did Jomons come from 3500 BC from Japan to America? I don't know. If this is not about an ancient voyage, it certainly is about one brave guy who made that trip alone from Japan to America across the largest body of water in the world, and that's John Turk. His voyage was pretty heroic in my opinion. So he crossed the North Pacific alone in a kayak. That's some modern day real sea adventure for you. Okay, well, that's my story of the Jomons possibly coming to America in 3500 BC. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe, and stop by my website if you think you might want to build a boat to start an adventure of your own. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you again soon.